Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei was transported to another world? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Prologue. I was riding my bicycle back from Murasawa's house when my manager Ravel informed me that she had an immediate and urgent summons that promised a great reward. I asked Ravel for the address to the new client's house and whether I should arrive via magic circle or ride my bike. Personally, I have been able to jump through a magic circle for over a year now, but my original clients Miltan and Murasawa insist on my bike riding entrance since it is very nostalgic for them. Ravel informed me that the request came from a small shrine on Hokkaido and that obviously, I couldn't ride a bicycle to another island in Japan's territory. I responded with mock anger, "Really, manager-san? Do you think I am stupid?" "Of course not, Isama, I would never say that you are stupid," she said with the emphasis on the word say. Then she giggled for a few seconds and coughed. Master, this is a very serious summons that asks specifically for you, and the Angiers family which holds the territory of Hokkaido, not only allowed for you to be summoned to their territory, but the Archduke himself pleaded with me to send you immediately. I can't even go home and sleep with Rias and Asia first. No, Ice, my darling, you must go now, besides tonight was supposed to be mine and Kaneko's turn to sleep with you, so this is an even greater sacrifice for me than it is for you. Okay, I get it, Ravel, I will make it up to you and Kaneko as soon as I can. You know that I love being in the catbird seat. I replied. Please send me the jump coordinates. They are coming through now, Ice, be careful and I love you. She said with a quaver in her voice. I jumped immediately and didn't catch the fear in her voice until well after I arrived. I came out of the magic circle in front of a new shrine that I had never seen before. It was dedicated to a moth. That is really odd, I thought aloud. There was a small golden statue of a moth in flight, and below the statue were two very tiny, very accurate-looking alabaster statues of fairies. I looked around and realized that I was already within the shrine, and whatever god or spirit that the shrine was dedicated to was not angry that a high-class devil was in its shrine standing before the altar. The fairy statues were knelt in prayer, but instead of facing their moth god, they were facing away. In fact, they were facing me directly, even though I was standing to one side of the altar. I was admiring the very lifelike appearance of the fairies. Their wings were translucent and they had very big breasts for such small fairies. In proportion, they were larger than Ria's breasts and maybe even larger than Akeno's. While admiring them, both of their breasts bounced in unison as the fairies bowed even lower, with their heads touching the marble slab they were kneeling on. They weren't statues at all, they were real fairies wearing white kimonos that almost matched their alabaster skin. Then they both spoke, or rather they sang to me in unison with the most beautiful voices I have ever heard. "Please, Dragon God, we beg you, please save Japan from Go." Their voices trailed away, as if they were terrified of even saying the name of whatever they were afraid of. I started to interrupt them when they called me a god, because I am clearly a devil, and there are only 3 dragon gods, Great Red, Orpheus, and Lilith, but the anguish in their song, no their prayer, was too heart-wrenching to interrupt. They sang the song to me 3 times, each time their voices died away before they could tell me who or what was the unspeakable threat they were so afraid of. I knelt before them and also bowed, just as low as they bowed to me with my forehead in the sand of the beach where the shrine was located. I did not know who or what these fairies were, but I could tell in my spirit that they were ancient deities with mystical power, even though I had never seen them before or heard of them. What must I do? Life 1. Kuoh Prefecture, but not Kuoh Town. You must cross the Great Void into our world and defeat a great evil, and the greatest threat Japan, no the world, has ever faced. What? Void Japan, world, what are you talking about? Please hurry, Dragon God, the worlds will only be linked for a short time, and when they are linked again, it will be too late. Everyone in Japan and perhaps the world will be killed or left desolate and starving in what will be left on a barren planet. I heard the urgency in their voices, and I saw the anguish and fear on their faces, the complete terror in their souls. Let's go. I said without hesitation. The fairies sang again, but this time I could not understand their words even though, as a devil, I can speak and understand all known languages. My vision became blurred and I could hear no sound, and then. Blackness. I awoke from what seemed a dream. I was lying peacefully under a tree in a park. I realized that it was nearly noon, even though what seemed like minutes ago, it was well after midnight. Also, I wasn't kneeling on a beach on Hokkaido, I was in a park in the middle of town, Kuoh Town. Is this a dream? Did someone mess with my memories? I was clearly home, in my own town. Wait, the park looked different, the town looked different. I was in the park where Rainer murdered me, where I met my master and the love of my life, Ria's Gremory. I realized I said her name out loud when I heard a familiar voice. Who is that? I heard another familiar voice, more importantly, who are you? Do you go to school around here? I don't recognize the uniform. And why are you lying on the grass on a Sunday afternoon with a school uniform on? asked the first voice. I didn't detect hostility from these girls' voices, and oddly, I couldn't detect either of their auras, so I turned around. Standing before me were Kiryu and Irina. They were dressed casually and they were standing close together like they were lifelong friends. Quit joking, Irina, you know who I am. I've never seen you before in my life, whoever you are, and how do you know my name? She paused briefly, looked closely at me and asked, have you ever seen him before, Aika-chan? Nope, doesn't ring a bell, Renee-chan, come on, let's go. They don't know me. What the hell happened? Did someone do a mind wipe spell on my childhood friend and now girlfriend, and I have never heard Kiryu Aika ever being referred to by her first name. Everyone called her Kiryu except her parents, who, come to think of it, I have never met. The girls walked away chatting. I had already been forgotten by both of them. I stood up slowly and concentrated on my wrist. My armor did not appear and there was no jewel, my arm just simply turned into the arm of a human-sized red dragon. Drake, partner, what the hell is going on? Silence. I searched for his presence and could not find it. I widened my concentration and tried to pick up the aura of the woman I love the most, Ria's, my master and fiancé. Nothing. Balance break. I shouted. Nothing happened except I startled a few birds into flight and Kiryu and Irina briefly looked back. They continued their walk away from me and Irina murmured, should we call the hospital, he may be an escaped mental patient. No, Kiryu replied, he is obviously harmless, he is probably a cosplayer or something. I have never seen that uniform before. Yeah, you are probably right, Aika. Do you want to come to my house and talk about boys? Motohama winked at me in school, do you think that he likes me? Really, the smartest, most popular guy in school winked at you? You should stick with Mitsuda, he is at least in your league. Said Kiryu, besides, I heard from student president Tsubaki that he has a crush on you. Irina sighed, I wish I had a boyfriend as good as Yanshiro. He really loves you. I listened until even my devil ears couldn't hear them anymore and sat wearily on the bench. I am really confused. Saji is in love with Kiryu, and apparently she is also in love with him. Motohama is the most popular guy in school, and Irina likes him. Tsubaki, not Sona, is the school president. Drake is silent and I can't feel his presence, and worst of all, I cannot put on my armor. What the hell is going on? I said out loud. I started walking around the town and began to notice other changes. Kuoh town is now Kuoh prefecture. The old school building has been torn down and the new school building has been painted a different color. I finally walked home and instead of the 5-story mansion, the original house is there. The name on address is Haidu and apparently Irina Shidu still lives next door. I cleared my thoughts and knocked on the door. My mother answered the door and asked, can I help you? I shook my head sadly and said, I'm sorry, I thought I knew someone who lives here. My mother hesitated for a few minutes and asked, do you live around here, young man? No, I am apparently lost and I don't know where I even live anymore. As I started to walk away, she called out, what is your name, young man? I couldn't tell her that my name is Issei Haidu, what if I actually live there? No, she clearly doesn't remember me or know who I am. I thought desperately and blurted out, my name is Issei Gremory. Why did I tell her that? Do I miss Rias that much? Do you need anything to eat, young man? You look like you lost your best friend and you look hungry. Please, I don't want to be an inconvenience to you. I said. Wait, it has been a long time since I had a young man visit me. I would welcome the company. My name is Mrs. Haidu, nice to meet you, Mr. Gremory. Oh, nice to meet you, Mrs. Haidu, I said, bowing, and yes, thank you for inviting me to dinner, it seems that I haven't eaten since last night. Oh my, said my mom, or rather, Mrs. Haidu, please come in. I sat at the table I was so familiar with and had a simple meal with her. It was plain, rice with a little chicken curry. And miso soup. After thanking her for the food, we started to eat. Mrs. Haidu, where is your husband, is he working late? No, she said, my husband passed away 17 years ago. I felt like Sayerg had punched me in the stomach. I am so sorry. I stammered. She smiled with a sad expression in her eyes and replied, he died shortly after we lost our last child. He was our third try and when he died in infancy, my husband never recovered. He slumped into a deep depression and one day he didn't wake up. The doctor said that he died of a heart attack, but I believe that he died of a broken heart. I couldn't think of anything to say so I bowed while shedding tears. I am so sorry, Mom. I didn't know then, realizing what I said, I apologized again and weakly said, it seemed that you remind me of my own mother. She smiled again and said, you remind me of my husband, Mr. Gremory. What did you say your first name is? Issei, I said. Issei, that was the name of our last child, he died before he was a year old. She stood up and pointed to a small shrine that I hadn't noticed before. There was a picture of my dad and a picture of me when I was a baby. I remember that picture because she was so proud that she often showed it to me and my friends when they came over to visit. I thought that was your name. It is an odd coincidence that you came to my door, Mr. Gremory. He died 17 years ago today. He sighed and asked, may I call you Ice? That was what I called my son. Yes, I said quietly, that would be an honor, all of my friends call me Ice. Well Ice, since you seem to be homeless, would you like to stay the night? I have a spare room. It would have been my son's room. There is a tatami mat and a small desk. I bought it when my son was born. I hoped that he would have a nice desk to do his homework on when he would have started school. I didn't have the heart to get rid of it. I guess I am a foolish old woman. She said and started to cry. Before I knew it, I was hugging her in a tight embrace and calling her mother. Instead of being shocked or offended, she sank into my arms and hugged me just as tightly. You remind me of what I imagined my Ice would be as a young man. Please stay with me until you remember where you live and come visit this old woman occasionally even after you do. Yes. I said crying, I promise, thank you Mrs. Haidu. Please call me Mom, she said still crying. I know that you must have a family that loves you, but it just felt so right when you called me Mom. Mrs. Haidu smiled and then asked me, may I call you Ice? That was what I called my son. Yes, I said quietly, that would be an honor, all of my friends call me Ice. Well Ice, since you seem to be homeless, would you like to stay the night? I have a spare room. It would have been my son's room. There is a tatami mat and a small desk. I bought it when my son was born. I hoped that he would have a nice desk to do his homework on when he would have started school. I didn't have the heart to get rid of it. I guess I am a foolish old woman. She said and started to cry. Before I knew it, I was hugging her in a tight embrace and calling her mother. Instead of being shocked or offended, she sank into my arms and hugged me just as tightly. You remind me of what I imagined my Ice would be as a young man. Please stay with me until you remember where you live and come visit this old woman occasionally even after you do. Yes. I said crying, I promise, thank you Mrs. Haidu. Please call me Mom, she said still crying. I know that you must have a family that loves you, but it just felt so right when you called me Mom. Yes, it feels right to call you Mom. You have no idea how I feel to now have a roof over my head. I followed her upstairs to my old bedroom. Mom turned to me and asked, Ice, do you have any other clothes to wear? No Mom, I don't. These clothes seem to be the only things that I have to my name. Mom smiled for the first time with a radiant smile I remember and cherish. Well Ice, you are in luck. I still have some of Goru's clothes. That's what my husband is named. My name is Mickey. I nodded and said I can never call you that. Somehow it doesn't sound right. I will just keep calling you Mom. Yes, I like that much better anyway Ice. She nodded and left my room. After a few minutes she returned with a pair of slacks, a dress shirt and some underwear. They are clean Ice. Even though they haven't been washed or worn for 17 years, I kept them in a cedar chest. You may smell like a cedar tree, but at least you won't smell sweaty and you can take a bath and have your clothes washed. I left a clean towel and washcloth, a robe and some of Goru's pajamas in the bathroom. After your bath, you can change and I will wash your clothes for you in the morning. Just leave them in the hamper after your bath. Later that night I drifted off to sleep listening to the steady breathing of my scent filled the house, and even though I missed all of the girls, I felt a little more at peace. I woke to the smell of breakfast. Again it was simple, a little fish, some more miso soup and a glass of milk. Thank you mother, is there anything I can do around the house to help you? Yes Ice, if you don't mind, I really need the lawn mowed and weeds pulled in my garden. Yes Mom, I will be honored to do chores like a proper son. I said with a smile, you can depend on me. I spent the rest of the morning doing chores and then, I asked Mom if she needed anything at the market. Yes Ice, I could use some fish if it is on sale. I do not have much, I am only working part-time as a housekeeper and I get by on Goru's life insurance and a small pension from his company. I smiled broadly and said, it seems that even though I was homeless until yesterday, I seem to have quite a bit of money in my wallet. I pulled a few bills out of my pocket and showed them to her. I actually had nearly a $500,000 yen in my pocket. I had meant to deposit it in the Gremory Bank on my way home from Murasawa's house, but I was distracted by Ravel's urgent summons and forgot. Was that the day before yesterday? I honestly don't know. I am just very glad that I forgot and now I can help my mom out quite a bit. Would you like some beef and pickled vegetables for dinner tonight? Oh my Ice, it has been a long time since I had some beef. Are you sure it is okay to use your money? Of course, you are putting a roof over my head and taking care of me. What son would not help out his mother? Mom clapped her hands and smiled happily. Yes Ice, please buy some groceries from the market. She then hesitated. Are you sure you don't need any more money? I still have a few yen left in my budget this month. No Mom, I replied, it is fine. I said, bowing to her, I will be back soon. Thank you Ice, I will depend on you. She said, returning my bow. After I left I started walking towards the market. Fortunately school had ended for the day and so I didn't have to worry about being stopped and asked why I wasn't in class. I kept noticing that this was my hometown, but it wasn't my hometown. The changes were subtle but noticeable. There wasn't a single Gremory-owned building in town, also the bank that is owned by the Gremory Holding Company had an unfamiliar name. Of course, I said aloud, this isn't the town I remember. It is funny, the same people work in the market that I remember. I have to remember to not be too familiar with them because, even though I know who they are, they don't know me. I saw Motohama on my way home from the market. He looked the same except instead of his usual slouch and leering grin, he was walking proudly. Of course that is because he was surrounded by girls. Wow, he really is popular with the ladies. Before entering the house I heard Irina call out, "Hey you, what are you doing walking into Mrs. Haidu's house? Even though you are dressed nice, you look like a delinquent. What are you doing?" Before I could think of an answer, Mom stuck her head out of the door and said, "It is fine Shidu, Issei is a relative who will be staying with me for a while. Okay Mrs. Haidu, I'm sorry I troubled you." Then after Mom returned to the kitchen I heard Irina say under her breath, "That's fine, but you still look like a delinquent, you better not be bothering her." I pretended to not hear her and entered the house with the groceries. Later that night, my mother asked me, "So Ice, I suppose I should enroll you in school tomorrow, but how am I going to do that? I suppose you could tell them that I lost my records in the Fukushima tsunami last year, and I have amnesia." Well I suppose that will work, the gods only know how many records were lost in that disaster. It was a foolish thing to say since the tsunami happened many years ago in my world, but I noticed a headline in the paper that reported that many people were still missing and the nuclear power plant was still offline. I suppose everything didn't happen the same in this world as it did in mine. On the plus side, the devastation from Apophis, Ka and Trihexia never happened here. But there was something just as terrible that is about to happen, at least, that was the parting words from the fairies. Was that really the night before last? Much later, in the middle of a sound sleep I was awoken by the most terrifying roar that I have ever heard. It was very far away, but along with the roar I felt the aura of something I could not even imagine. There was no magic in the aura, but there was power, a terrifying primal power from a mindless beast that had only animal intelligence. It was like the aura of a dragon lord, no, even a heavenly dragon's aura. It reminded me of Grendel, but a Grendel with the mind of a lizard and the malice of Hades. It was truly an almost overwhelming power that I could only describe as a monster. What the hell is that, I screamed. My mother awoke because of my scream and came running into my room. She was only wearing a thin t-shirt and panties. She didn't even think to put on a robe. I clearly saw her breasts through her shirt and her nipples were erect from her excitement and fear. I noticed that her pulse was racing and she was sweating and breathing rapidly. I could smell the adrenaline in her sweat and I saw terror in her eyes. All of this I noticed in an instant. I closed my eyes and even though I was sitting up in bed, I bowed as low as I possibly could from a sitting position. "I'm sorry mother, I had a terrible nightmare." "So sorry Issei, what was the nightmare about?" she asked sitting on the side of my bed. She was calming down, but the rapid dose of adrenaline was still coursing through her bloodstream. She had been badly frightened by my scream, but she was mainly concerned for me. Then she looked down and noticed her immodesty. "I'm so sorry Ice, I should have put on a robe before coming in here." She stood up and left my room. A few minutes later she had returned, she was now wearing a robe. "I apologize again for my immodesty. Won't you come and join me in the kitchen?" She paused a minute after I nodded my head and left my room to head down the stairs. I put on my robe, no, my father's robe and followed her down the stairs. By the time I entered the kitchen she had already started a kettle on the stove. "I think we could both use a cup of kai while you tell me about your nightmare. There is chamomile in the kai and it is decaffeinated, so it will help us both to get back to sleep, son." "Now Ice, tell me about a nightmare. Was it about your family? Did something terrible happen to them?" "No, I apologize for my scream waking you up and frightening you so." I paused a minute and then said quietly, "It must be scary to live alone for so long." "Well, not usually, although sometimes an unexpected noise will rouse me from my sleep and give me a bit of a fright." She looked me in the eye and then said, "Tell me about your nightmare Ice. I really don't know you, but I can tell it was something that badly frightened you." I took a deep breath and said I didn't see anything, but I heard a terrible roar. It sounded like a bunch of lions and elephants all roared together and then it sounded almost like a ship's horn. I looked at her and said, "I really can't describe it any better than that." "Gajira," she said softly, "you heard Gajira in your dream." She paused a full minute and then said, "I suppose everyone has heard his roar either in the old newsreels or in their dreams." "Who is Gajira?" I asked finally. "You really have lost your memory Ice," my mother replied. "Gajira is a kaiju, no, the kaiju. He is the monster that has cursed Japan since 1954. "Kaiju," I interrupted. "I remember hearing that name. What are kaiju?" "Kaiju are the monsters that the gods have cursed Japan and the world with since human arrogance created the atomic bomb," Mom said quietly. "But Japan never used atomic bombs, right?" "No Ice, Japan never used atomic bombs. They were used against us because we would not surrender, even though America had all but defeated us. Even after they dropped the first bomb, our military refused to surrender, even after the Son of Heaven wanted to. Yes, I remember that much at least, I replied. If I remember, when Emperor Hirohito wanted to surrender after the second bomb, some of his military officers tried to stage a coup in order to keep fighting. Yes, Ice. My mom said sadly, because of our own arrogance, America dropped not one, but two bombs on the home of the gods. She then went on, I have no doubt that if the Son of Heaven had not surrendered, America would have even dropped a bomb on Tokyo, destroying a dynasty that is thousands of years old, when the first Son of Heaven came down from the goddess Amaterasu to rule Japan. Are gods real, mother? I asked in a low voice. No, Issei, I suppose not, even though I believe in them. Would they really stand by and let Kaiju destroy Japan over and over? No, I suppose not, I said disappointed. I had hoped that gods were real in this world and that devils, fallen angels and angels were also real, I just couldn't sense them. But back to Kaiju, I asked, what are they? So sorry Ice, I suppose an old woman will ramble so. But you are not old, you are still a beautiful woman, I interrupted. Thank you Gremory Issei Senshi said, bowing slightly and blushing. That is good to hear. No one has said that I was beautiful for a long time. She blushed even more. If you were just a little older, I might be tempted to invite you to pillow with me. No. I stuttered, immediately turning red, even my nose started dripping. Was I attracted to, no, even lusting after my own mother? No, yes, no, it wouldn't be right, I finally said weakly. I'm so sorry Ice, she said, turning red. She bowed all the way to the floor. Perhaps I am not that old after all, she trailed off. I immediately pulled her to her feet and embraced her tightly. You are not old. You are a beautiful woman, but I can only think of you as my mother, you even look like her. I began openly weeping. I may never see her, nor the rest of my family again, but I do love you, Miki Haidu. You will always be a mother to me. My mother returned the embrace just as tightly and fled the kitchen in embarrassment. I heard her run up the stairs, into her room, and she almost slammed the door behind her. I could clearly hear her anguished sobs as she said, Goru Issei Goru, I miss you so much. Why did you have to leave me all alone? I knew that there would be no more conversation that night and climbed the stairs and went quietly into my own room. I felt terrible, that I had done something, or said something unforgivable to her. There was nothing else to do, so I changed into pajamas and climbed quietly into bed. I listened for hours to the sound of my mother crying. I wanted to run into her room and comfort her, but even I knew that it would only make it worse. Finally her sobbing stopped and I could hear her slow breathing as she drifted into sleep just a little before dawn. I didn't go to sleep myself. As a devil, no, as a dragon, I could go several days and nights without sleep when necessary. Instead I waited until 9 o'clock and set out for the library. It was in exactly the same place that it was in my own world. I went to the librarian and asked to use one of the library computers. After obtaining a pass, I logged into one of the computers and began studying about Kaiju, and Gajira in particular. Wow, I said aloud, he is over 118 meters tall. He is even taller than Old Man Tannen. He doesn't need to eat, and he is powered by a nuclear reactor within his heart. He was created from a Rhedosaurus that was sleeping at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean when America tested the first hydrogen bomb on the Bikini Atoll. Gajira was very close to the explosion that, rather than vaporize the dinosaur, it completely changed him into the monster that he is now. I then, out of curiosity, looked up the word Kaiju. They are all giant monsters that were created by nuclear radiation, well, all except for Ghidorah. 4 Kaiju are still alive, and the rest were killed by Gajira. The remaining Kaiju are Gajira, Rodan, Mothra and Ghidorah. Mothra. Wasn't that the name of the moth god of the shrine in Hokkaido? Yes. Mothra is a giant caterpillar that after pupating, turns into a giant moth. Mothra is apparently immortal since Gajira has killed him many times, he is immediately reborn. Rodan is a giant pterodon that can fly at hypersonic speed and causes destruction by his massive sonic boom. Ghidorah is a kaiju that came from another world that was sent by aliens who wanted to conquer the earth and they wanted Ghidorah to destroy Gajira. Instead, Gajira injured and possibly even killed Ghidorah and he also destroyed the alien spacecraft which stopped the invasion. Gajira is destructive, but at least he stopped an alien takeover of the world. None of the kaiju have been seen in over 20 years, but people have reported hearing both Gajira's distinctive roar and Ghidorah's almost machine-like call. These 4 kaiju are missing but presumed alive. Excuses me, a voice interrupted. I looked up and saw a policeman standing over me. Why aren't you in school? Before I could think up an excuse another voice spoke up, he just moved here. He is a relative of Mrs. Haidu. Oh? Said the policeman, what is your name, young man? My name is Gremory Issei. I am just doing a little studying before I enroll in class here in Kuoh Academy. Yes, he is a childhood friend of my daughter, Aika, as a matter of fact, said the other man. I told him that I would bring his enrollment paperwork here to the library. Very well, Superintendent Kiryus, I will take my leave now. The policeman bowed formally, turned and left. Mr. Kiryu took a seat opposite of me and looked at me for a few minutes, then he spoke, "Well, Issei Grimmery, or should I say hi to Issei, we need to talk." What do you need to know?" I asked, "And how do you know me?" "Well, hi to Issei, let's just say that both I and my daughter have extrasensory perception, and my daughter saw you materialize out of thin air on Sunday. She also told me that you aren't a human, but something else entirely. Now that I have met you, I would have to agree." Then he said in almost a whisper, "You are a dragon, aren't you?" "What, quit joking around, sir, I am an ordinary human just like anyone else." "You are not, and neither am I, and for that matter, neither is my daughter Aika. We are part of the Japanese Self-Defense Force, Kaiju Division." He then showed me a very official ID signed by the Emperor himself. When my daughter searched the nearby dimensions for someone who could protect us and put an end to the curse of the Kaiju for all time, she started dreaming about another world. A world where magic exists and mythological beings are real, and then she saw you hide Issei, or should I call you by your title, the Sekiryuite. I was completely dumbfounded, who brought me here? Our worlds exist side by side, Haidu-san, very few people can sense other worlds, and most who can are insane because their minds cannot comprehend the multiverse. I can read people's thoughts and to a small degree I can put suggestions in their minds that they think are their own ideas, but Akia can't see other dimensions and communicate with certain beings in them. She managed to contact Mothra's kami in our world and link them with your world. They were able to jump between the worlds and send back a champion who can destroy Ghidorah once and for all and make Ajira leave Japan alone for good. Just for the sake of the argument, and I am who you believe I am and that you are who you say you are, where is your proof? Without a word, Mr. Kiryu lifted a briefcase onto the table and opened it. Inside, sleeping were the two fairies that I saw on Hokkaido. These kami came to our world when Mothra first emerged from his egg. They were drawn here by Mothra as moths are drawn to a flame, but instead of burning up in Mothra's flame, they were reborn not just as kami from your world, but as true goddesses in our world. Mothra is benevolent and intelligent, though he cannot talk to men. He can talk to these goddesses and they can talk to us. Come to my house tonight. My wife is visiting her mother in Tokyo, and my daughter needs to talk with you and tell you the plan to defeat the Kaiju. I wanted to argue and deny everything, but he simply knew too much about me to be anything other than who and what he claimed to be. Stay at our house tonight, Haidu. Aika has already contacted Mrs. Haidu and told her that you would spend the night with us and that I would personally enroll you into Kuoh Academy in the morning. I followed Mr. Kiryu to the house and he invited me inside. The table was already set and Akia was busy cooking in the kitchen. She cheerfully waved her dad and I to the table and said that dinner was almost ready. We are eating a Chinese dish tonight, dragon and phoenix Szechuan style, sliced chicken blended with jumbo shrimp, snow peas, baby corn, mushrooms, broccoli, carrots, and water chestnuts in a special sauce, with added red peppers to give the dragon some heat. She brought the food to the table and served it onto 3 plates. Her father's plate was put at the head of the table, while Akia sat her plate next to mine at the near end of the table. Is my cooking up to par with Mrs. Haidu's cooking? She has been teaching the third-year girls how to cook in the home economics class at Kuoh Academy. Yes, it is very good, it is almost as good as my real mother's cooking. It didn't surprise me that she was teaching a cooking class. In my world she first taught Asia and then Rias how to cook in the Haidu style, and then Akeno, Zenobia, Irina, Ravel, Lafay and Kaneko were asking to help out in the kitchen so they could learn from the master. Finally even Kuroka meekly asked to help. It was so funny that we wanted to laugh at that wild alley cat pulling in her claws and sitting still like a house cat, watching and learning. The meal was over. Akia's father excused himself and said that there was paperwork to finish before I could become a legal student at Kuoh Academy and to leave it to him. He said that he would have everything ready including a proper uniform for me to wear to school in the morning. After Mr. Kiryu left, Aika said that she had a special dessert just for me and hoped that I would try it with her. It was a French-style puff pastry made with cheesecake cashews and sweet deep-fried snails. It looked a little unusual, but I didn't want to insult her by refusing to try it, so I took a hesitant bite. It tasted wonderful, and then after a few bites, she poured us both a large cup of warm sake. Normally I would have objected because we were still a little underage, but the food and especially the dessert were removing my inhibitions. After 2 cups of sake apiece and another pastry we were feeling very warm and comfortable. I was so comfortable that I didn't even notice when Akia left the kitchen quietly and reappeared in a see-through negligee. I did notice immediately when she took both of my hands in hers and licking my left index finger, she firmly pulled my right hand through the wide sleeve of her negligee and directly onto her left breast. Then she took my other hand and guided it up underneath her negligee, where I found out that she wasn't wearing any panties. There is a fair chance that we are both going to be killed in the upcoming battle, and I don't want either of us to die a virgin, and, if we both live, you will go back to your world and I get to keep a little dragon in me. What about Saji? I said protesting but not pulling away. What about him? She asked. He has probably pillowed every girl in the kendo club and I'm betting that you will not reach the clouds and rain in only 5 minutes like he does. It's great for him, but he always leaves me and the rest of the girls unsatisfied. I'm betting that the Red Dragon Emperor can keep loving me for at least 29 minutes. My mind was confused, but my inhibitions melted away like snow under a hot sun. Did Kiryus drug me? Did I really care, and did it even matter? Quite suddenly and as a complete surprise to myself, my dragon instinct to mate and to possess what it desires, to leave my permanent mark on her body and soul. You belong to me now, Kiryus. My dragon wings unfurled and wrapped around both of us like a warm leather blanket. Much later, Akia smiled happily and said, I have tamed the great red, no, I have tamed the great crimson dragon in the kitchen, under my own roof. She then said, I will give you a strong son, Issei, and then I will take care of Miki Haidu so that she will never be alone for the rest of her life. I can't follow you to your world because my other self is there and you already have so many beautiful women in your harem, but I, Kiryus, bedded the dragon first. Then we both drifted off to sleep in each other's arms. We awoke to the smell of coffee and eggs frying along with thick-cut bacon. We were still on the floor, naked and in each other's arms, but now we were lying on a tatami and there was a thick blanket covering us up. We then saw Aika's father staring down at us with a bemused look on his face. Breakfast will be ready soon and both of you have school today. It would be bad manners if both the class rep and the new transfer student showed up late together for class. He then ordered, up the stairs, both of you, and be sure to thoroughly wash each other's backs, then dress quickly, and then get down here to eat. Your dad is cool with us sleeping together on the kitchen floor in his own house. I asked, very embarrassed. Oh Ice, he would have wanted me to all but rape you Sunday morning when you materialized and fell asleep. I probably would have if Irina hadn't showed up when she did. Your pheromones were filling the park and I wanted to get Irina away as fast as I could before she really got a good sniff of your irresistible scent. It's fine for you to her now. As long as I am first, I don't care who you pillow with next. Hell, you should run into Mrs. Haidu's bedroom tonight and take her, she is all but begging for it, you know. When you sleep, your pheromones escape out of your pores and announce to all sexually mature females that a dragon has come to conquer her. Kiryus, she is my mother. I hissed. When we climbed into the tub, she said no, she isn't. Her son died 17 years ago, and so did her husband. She may look like your mother, but she is most definitely not your mother. Give her a son or even a daughter to take care of her in her old age. He or she will never be a true dragon as you are, but they will be dragon enough to protect her from any earthly danger. She needs a child Ice. She wants your child Ice, even if she won't admit to herself. She is only 40 and she can easily carry a child. Plus, your child won't be sick and die like her lost children did. Your son or daughter, whichever you give her, will be a demigod among mere humans. Her child, my child, and hell, even Irina's child, could grow up to protect this world, just like you will protect yours when you return. Will I return to my world, Aika? I wondered aloud. Yes, Ice, she said, kissing me while guiding my hands to her breasts. Just a quick squeeze to get me through the day, Ice. And Ice, if you don't pillow Miki Haidu tonight, I am going to drug you and use my psychic power to force you to have a threesome with her and me. Now get out and get dressed before I lose control and start sucking your dick right here in the bathtub. She grinned and then said, then we will be late and my father, the school superintendent, will be angry at both of us. About an hour later, I find myself being introduced to third year class 2B. It is weird because I recognize everyone except the sensei, Yashi Toranaga. My name is Issei Gremory, please take care of me. Of course, Ravel, Kiba and Asia are missing, and I expect that. I am surprised that Motohama and Mitsuda are sitting in front and both Miyama and Katz are openly fawning over Motohama and Haze is trying to catch Mitsuda's eye. Well, I guess Haze liking Mitsuda isn't a surprise since even in my world she likes him. It is nice, however, that no one is looking at me with disgusted eyes and muttering Haidu the hentai under their breath. Sensei Toranaga gestures to an empty desk in the second row and said, Gremory Issei, please take your seat next to class rep. Kiryus. Gremory? Asked Haze, what an odd name, are you a foreigner? Well, I am Japanese, but I have a European last name. I said. One of my ancestors was saved by someone from Europe and in gratitude, he changed his surname to honor his rescuer. Aika said, he is my childhood friend that moved away before we started school. Yes, I said, I am a relative of Haidu Miki and I am currently home staying with her. Sensei Toranaga called the class to order and so I began my studies at the Kuoh Academy of this world. It felt odd, I kept having flashbacks of my friendship with Mitsuda and Motohama and now they are strangers. I miss Asia and my juniors, Kaneko, Ravel, and even Gasper. During lunch I sat with Aika and Irina who occasionally eyed me suspiciously. Finally Aika said, look, I didn't recognize him at first because we parted a long time ago, but then I remembered him. Okay, Aika, you convinced me. "Hey Gremory, do you want to go to karaoke with Ika and I after school?" Before I could answer, Ika said, "Unfortunately, we can't go today Arane-chan. I already promised Ice that I would help him with some errands for Mrs. Haidu today. Perhaps another day Shidu," I said regretfully, "and call me Ice, that is what all of my friends call me." "Okay Ice, in that case, you can call me Arena." Arena blushed slightly. "I would like to get to know you better." "Yes, I would like that Arena," I said, bowing slightly. Saji looked at us a few times but said nothing. He looked at me with jealousy because I was sitting with his girlfriend, and Mitsuda and Motohama gave me a disapproving look. Meanwhile, many of the girls in the class came over and introduced themselves. They all seemed to be drawn to me. Haze came over and said hello, which made Mitsuda angry. Clearly, we won't be friends in this world. After school, Ika and I walked to the park and sat down on a bench. "You have to remember that your pheromones are very strong. All of the girls are drawn to you, and all of the boys are going to be intimidated by you, but they won't know why." I scratched my head and said, "It isn't that way in my world. Mitsuda, Motohama and I are best friends, and most of the girls despise us. They call us the perverted trio, and they call me Haidu the hentai. The only girls who like me are devils like myself." I trailed off and Kiryu looked at me. "Devil? I thought that you are a dragon." "Well, it's complicated. In my world I was an ordinary human until I was murdered by my first girlfriend." "What?" Kiryu gasped. "Yes, in my world I was murdered by a fallen angel named Rainer who pretended to be my girlfriend just so she could get me alone and murder me. As a matter of fact, it was right there in front of the fountain." Kiryu glanced at the fountain and said nothing, so I continued. "She murdered me because of my sacred gear called Boosted Gear, or the Gauntlet of the Red Dragon Emperor." She looked puzzled but let me continue. "Rainer was afraid of my sacred gear and wanted to kill me before it emerged. Anyway, I didn't know that I had a sacred gear until later. By chance a certain girl gave me a card that summons a devil just before I met up with Rainer for my date. When we were alone, Rainer stabbed me and left me to die. While I was dying, I looked at my hand that was covered with my own blood and I thought about a beautiful older student who has crimson hair. Her hair is exactly the same color as the blood on my hand. Her name is Ria's Gremory and I wished that I could see her one more time before I died. My wish called to her and she turned out to be the devil that the card summoned. She brought me back to life and made me one of her servants and I became a devil." "Wait," Kiryu said, "I thought that you were a dragon." "No, you are a dragon. Let me finish, Ika. Because of the sacred gear that I have, the Gauntlet of the Red Dragon Emperor, I was born with the soul of a dragon bound to my own soul. His name is Drake and until I was summoned here, he has always been a part of me. I don't know how it happened, but it seems that he didn't come with me when I was sent here by those fairies that I saw sleeping in your father's briefcase." "Go on," she said, so I continued. "I became a devil a year ago and Drake awakened and became my partner, but a few months ago, I was murdered again and that time my body was completely destroyed but my soul was still in my dragon armor. I died in a space called the Dimensional Gap and my body that was disintegrating landed on the back of the Apocalypse Dragon, who is named Great Red. He isn't just an ordinary dragon, he is a dragon god. I went into the Dimensional Gap after a devil named Shalba Beelzebub who had caused a lot of trouble for my world. And he had hurt and then kidnapped a dragon god named Orpheus who was my friend and then he escaped into the Dimensional Gap. I followed him into the Dimensional Gap to rescue my friend and to kill Shalba. Before escaping he managed to poison me with a poison that is lethal to all dragons and also humans. That poison eventually killed me and destroyed my body, but before I died I managed to kill Shalba and rescue Orpheus. But my soul didn't depart my armor and Drake's presence continued to stay with me. Drake and the two dragon gods created a new body made from Great Red's own flesh and my soul was placed in my new body, the body of a dragon. So now I am a dragon, who used to be human, and also a devil." Kiryu laughed and said, "You know Ice, you are a very interesting person. A dragon and a devil." Then she kissed me and said, "Does that mean that I sold my soul to the devil last night when we made love?" No, that isn't how devil contracts work. A service is provided by a devil in exchange for a price of equal value." Kiryu smiled and said, "Well, it would have been worth it. So, do you want to go back to my house and do it again?" She kissed me and murmured, "This time we can do it on my bed." "Absolutely," I said, and taking her in my arms we shared a long kiss and hand, we walked to her house and went upstairs to her room. An hour later, we were lying in the afterglow of our lovemaking when we heard the door open and Ika's father Basara came into the house. Of course he noticed our shoes in the entryway and called out cheerfully, "Whenever you two are finished, come downstairs. There are a few things that I need to discuss with Issei." "Well, back to business, Ice," Ika said cheerfully, "let's go talk to my father." Ika and I dressed and went downstairs to find Mr. Gremory making a pot of kai. "Well, Haidu, I know that you are a dragon, can I see your transformation?" "I have only transformed in this world once," I said, scratching my head, "and it was fairly recently." Ika smiled wickedly and said, "And he was amazing." I blushed, Aika laughed, and her father just looked at us for a few minutes and then just said, please keep that to yourselves. I really don't want the details of my daughter's love life. He then coughed and said while pouring the kai. I have secured an old JSDF base nearby so you can train or practice if necessary. In the meantime, I would like to see your transformation if possible. I concentrated on my memory of Great Red and Drag, but nothing happened at first, then I tried to remember the emotional energy and power that preceded the transformation. Aika said, we could always have sex again if you think it will help. I was thinking about agreeing, but her father held out his hand and said, I'm sure that would be quite enjoyable, but somehow I don't think you will have the luxury of an hour of sex prior to battling a kaiju. I started to say something, but he just said, you two were rather loud last night. Kiryus bent over and backing into me she rubbed her butt against my crotch. Be serious Aika, her father said, this really is a matter of life and death. Mothra's kami have told me about your great potential and power, and you are going to need all of that and more to stand a chance against a kaiju, so, if you don't mind Haidu, I need you to concentrate. I began to think of my true queen form, and then I imagined my armor reappearing, but instead of being made of metal, it was my own skin. I saw my arms change color, first to red and then crimson. I felt my wings grow out of my back and weren't the devil wings I am used to, nor were they like the dragon wings on my armor, they were from my own body. I could feel my blood flowing through the capillaries in my wings. I could feel the bones flex and the skin stretch across their bony frame. I started to stretch them out to their full length and quickly realized that the room wasn't wide enough, so without a word, I opened the back door and walked into Basara Kiryus' walled garden, where I stretched out my wings to their full length. I have a 12-meter wingspan, and I realized that I was looking down on Mr. Kiryus. I was over 3 meters tall, and I had a 6-meter long tail. I didn't need drag to handle the flying. I knew how to fly. I could feel the slight eddies in the current of the air. My clothes were ripped apart because not only did I become taller, I had became wider, and my skin turned into armor plate that looked much my armor, but it was organic, it was my own skin, denser and tougher than the skin of a crocodile. I had horns growing out of my forehead just above my eyes. I could see even better than I could as a devil. I could see in infrared the small animals around the garden. My face didn't look at all human, it was the face of a giant crocodile, but I wasn't a crocodile, I was a dragon god on this world. I heard a surprised gasp and turned and saw a small human creature staring in front of me with a mixture of lust and fear. Then I first sniffed and then I breathed in her aroma. She was a female with a mature body that ached to be possessed by me, and it was a familiar scent. Then the female made a sound ice. I then realized that the sound that came from her mouth was my name, and then I realized that this female is my chosen mate, she is mine, and I am going to possess her. Nothing is going to stand in my way. Men, devils, angels, fallen angels, gods and kaiju of this world, cross me to your own peril. I grabbed the female in my 4 claws, strong but tender, power with gentleness, titanium wrapped in silk. I am the Sekiryu, I am the crimson heavenly dragon, and this female is my mate. If a hair on her head is harmed, I will turn you to ash whether you are a man or a kaiju. With a single beat of my wings and a mighty leap, I shot into the sky and flew with pure animal ecstasy. I was flying in ever-widening circles in the air over the Sea of Japan. I began circling faster and faster, and very soon I broke through the sound barrier with 3 distinct sonic booms. My mate was safe in my arms and warmed by my body heat. Instead of being afraid, she was content to be held in my embrace as we flew higher and faster. In my joy of flying, I almost missed the metal bird that rose up from the peninsula to the north to challenge me. I am a dragon god, and no one is going to challenge my superiority and live. The metal bird accelerated toward me flying at Mach 1. I executed a 90-degree turn at Mach 2 and shot away from the metal bird in a turn that it couldn't take, but while I was watching and playing with one metal bird, another surprised me by sneaking in behind and launched 4 flaming arrows at me. One of them struck my back and exploded but did no harm. I turned and dodged another salvo of 4 arrows from the metal bird. I turned my head and taking a deep breath I blew out a flame that is hotter than the surface of the sun toward the arrows, and they didn't even have an opportunity to explode, they transitioned directly into ash from my dragon fire. When the birds saw what I was capable of, they increased to their maximum speed and tried to run away from the fight. I easily caught the metal birds with my back claws and intended to climb high into the sky and then dive at the earth with my maximum speed and let them slam into the ground just before I pulled out of the dive. Then I remembered. I am Issei Haidu, and I don't kill unless it is absolutely necessary. I remembered that these metal birds are fighter jets and they were being piloted by South Korean pilots. I flew more gently to a deserted beach just a few kilometers from Seoul and remembered Kiryus still safe in my arms, and I didn't want to kill innocent men who thought they were being invaded by another jet. When they realized that I am actually a dragon, they probably wanted to stop fighting and run for home. So I landed on a deserted beach, ordered the pilots to get out of their jets. I told them to run away. Once they were far enough away I shielded Ika with my wings and then I melted the jets into the sand. All that remained was molten metal slowly cooling and molten glass. I gently released Ika and profusely apologized. I had forgotten who I am, Ika. I just knew that I was a dragon and I was caught up in the joy and power of being a dragon. Ika laughed and said, that had to have been the most thrilling thing that ever happened in my life, or on second thought, the second most thrilling. Having sex with a dragon is definitely first. We should get back to my house, my father may be worried about me now. I once again picked Ika up and held her in my embrace. Then I climbed into the sky and headed back to Japan. While flying back to Japan, I began to think about Tannen's ability to change size at will. His normal height is 15 meters, well he can shrink in size to be the height of an ordinary human. My normal height is 170 centimeters, so I decided to see if I could change size. Once I returned to Japan, I landed on a deserted beach and set Ika down. Ooh, sex on the beach, Ika said with a big smile on her face, I can't wait. I scratched my head and said, that sounds like fun, but I want to see if I can change my size. I am ordinarily not much taller than you, but I am almost 1.5 meters taller. I know dragons in my world who can change their size at will, so I want to do a little experiment to see if I can. Just don't let your dick shrink, eyes, Ika replied, leering at my crotch. It is one of my favorite things. I will try to not disappoint you, Ika. But let me concentrate for a bit. I said to myself, I am 170 centimeters tall. And I was able to shrink to my ordinary size. Then I said, Tannen is 15 meters tall, and Vitra is nearly 18 meters tall. I felt myself grow larger, and looking down at Ika, I judged that I am now about 20 meters tall. Then I thought, Great Red and Gajira are both 100 meters tall, and with Great Red's help, I was able to grow to 100 meters tall to battle the Jabberwock in the underworld. It took more concentration, but after about 10 minutes I began to grow. Soon I passed 50 meters and kept growing. After another 10 minutes I was 100 meters tall. I could easily see the Tokyo skyline 35 kilometers away. I could probably see further, but Tokyo was just at the edge of the horizon. I then looked down at Ika Kiryus, who was a tiny figure at my feet. I could easily see the part in her hair and the ribbon she used to tie her hair into twin tails. I could see the tips of her nipples poking into her shirt. I could see everything down to the smallest detail. I looked up at the moon that was rising into the sky and I could see individual craters. I looked into the sky and I could even see the faint ring around Saturn and the bands and great red spot on Jupiter. I have the vision of both a telescope and a microscope. I looked at Ika again and I could even see the individual hairs on her head and I could feel the warmth of her body. Suddenly I desired her again and I shrank again to my normal height and reverted back to my normal form. I stood naked before her and said, I love you, Ika Kiryus. Ika started to undress and said, I love you too, Issei Haidu. I finished helping her undress and we made love with tender and care. There was no rush as we explored each other's bodies. It was nearly dawn when I transformed back into a 3-meter tall dragon and taking her in my arms again, I flew her back to her house. Ika tried the door and said, we're locked out. I left my keys with my clothes on the beach. Before I could answer, we heard the bolt turn and Basara Kiryus opened the door to usher us into the house. He pretended to not notice our nakedness and told Ika to go and get dressed. He then asked me to fly back to get her clothes and said that he had some clothes for me to wear when I returned. Fortunately you and I are about the same size, Issei. Then he said, please hurry, I don't want the neighbors to see a dragon flying around and it will be dawn soon. I flew back to the beach and picked up Ika's clothes. Then I returned to Ika's house to find Ika dressed and sitting on the couch with her father. I think that you need to return to the Haidu house. I have no doubt that Mrs. Haidu is worried about you. I went into the bathroom and put on the clothes that Mr. Kiryus had left for me and then I said goodbye. School starts at 8 a.m. and both of you should not miss class. Ika will go to school today, but I think that you need to spend the day with Mrs. Haidu. I will inform the school that you will not be attending class today. I walked home and knocked lightly on the door. I was fairly certain that my mother, or should I say, Miki Haidu, was asleep, but she wasn't. She opened the door and let me into the house. I fell asleep on the couch waiting for you, eyes, and I woke up a little while ago. I was frightened that something had happened to you since I expected you back home yesterday evening. I could see the tears of concern in her eyes and I immediately felt shame and bowed an apology. I am sorry, I should have called. I spent the night at Kiryus Ika's house last night. I was talking to Mr. Kiryus and fell asleep on the couch. I felt guilty for the lie, but I couldn't exactly tell her the truth that I turned into a dragon, flew to Korea and after downing 2 South Korean aircraft, I had sex on the beach with my classmate. Oh. She said and let the matter drop. I don't think that she entirely believes me. In any case, Mr. Kiryu has given me permission to take a day off from school to spend the day with you. Miki clapped her hands and said, excellent, we need to go buy you some clothes. You can't very well keep wandering around in Goru's clothes. I nodded and we went into the kitchen where I offered to make breakfast for her. How about an American-style breakfast? I asked, how do you like your eggs cooked? We both ended up having fried eggs with toast and some smoked salmon. We drank kai and watched the sunrise while sitting on the couch and chatting. She avoided asking me about my past, but told me about her life. I work as a housekeeper part-time, and I also teach a cooking class at Kuoh Academy. Mr. Kiryu approached me to teach cooking a few years ago, and I teach the second-year girls as well as any boys that want to learn the culinary arts. Sometimes I think that he offered me the job out of pity because I don't think that I am that good of a cook, but I am grateful nonetheless. That isn't true, I said reassuringly and put my arm around her. All of the girls in my class say that yours is the most popular class in school. They all came up to me to tell me how good of a teacher and chef you are. The hug was so natural that I didn't even realize that I put my arm around her, but instead of pulling away she nestled into me and putting her head on my shoulder, she drifted off into sleep. At around 9 o'clock she awoke suddenly and blushed slightly. I'm sorry Ice, I didn't intend to use you for a pillow. I don't mind, Mom, I actually enjoyed holding you while you slept. In any case, I think that we better go shopping for your clothes. Yes, Mom, I answered, I have enough money to buy clothes, but you can help me pick out what is fashionable around here. We both got up from the couch and stretched in unison, and then we both laughed because of it. We decided to walk to the mall because it was only a couple of miles from the house. We spent the morning clothes shopping. Miki was surprised with the amount of money I was carrying, but she didn't say anything. She even allowed me to buy her a few outfits. We then stopped off for a hamburger in the food court where she insisted on paying for our meals. After lunch I carried the packages as we walked back to the house. Just a couple of blocks from the mall I saw a delivery truck heading directly at us. I could see the driver slumped over the steering wheel and his foot was obviously on the accelerator because the truck was gaining speed. I didn't even think, my body reacted on its own. A threat was bearing down on someone that I love and my dragon instinct took over. I dropped the bags and immediately transformed into a 3-meter dragon. I jumped in front of my mother and put my arms up to stop the truck. The truck slammed into me at 50 kilometers per hour and I stopped it cold. The truck stopped like it had hit a bridge and the driver crashed through the windshield. I reached around and caught him as he passed me and then I remembered I turned to face Miki Hayato who I expected to see cowering in fear. Instead I saw gratitude and admiration on her face and despite her heart racing from the near-death experience, her skin flushed. Did I see lust on her face? Fortunately there was no one around to see the accident and my transformation, and my mother, I mean Miki, took out her cell phone and called emergency services. I examined the driver and I could tell that he had experienced a heart attack. He was dead before he even crashed through the windshield. I didn't know what to do with the truck, so I picked it up and threw it down a nearby ravine. Afterwards I returned to my human form and quickly changed into some of the clothes that I was carrying in one of my shopping bags and stuffed the tatters of my ruined clothes into the bag as we waited for the ambulance. Miki bowed to me and said, thank you for saving me Ice. She paused for a couple of minutes and then said, well that was unexpected. She stared at me for several minutes and finally said, I thought that dragons were only folklore, but I can't dispute my own eyes. I returned her bow and said, well to tell you the truth, they probably are folklore in this world, but I am from another world. I was called here to protect this world from the kaiju. I believe you Ice, she said and collapsed into my arms. She was still unconscious when the ambulance arrived. I told the paramedics that the truck had narrowly missed us as it crashed through the fence into the ravine. I told them that my mom had only fainted from fright and then I pointed to the truck driver who was lying a few feet from us. His hands and face were cut from going through the windshield, but there was no blood flowing from the wounds. I pulled him from the ravine, I said, but I think that he is dead. The paramedic nodded and pulled out his stethoscope and confirmed what I had already said. I expected that he was dead because he wasn't bleeding. I said think that he maybe had a heart attack. He was slumped over the steering wheel when he went by us. The other paramedic was checking on Miki when she revived. She looked around and seeing me kneeling near her and the paramedic kneeling beside me and said, I'm okay, I sometimes faint when I get overexcited or frightened. The paramedic nodded and stood up. I helped Miki to her feet and we waited for the police to arrive. They arrived a few minutes later and took our statements. Miki said that the truck had barely missed us and she fainted. I told the officer that I had tried to rescue the driver after he crashed, but that he was already dead. The paramedics both agreed with me that he was probably dead before the crash and that he probably had a massive heart attack. After we finished our statements we bowed to the policemen and the paramedics and walked home. When we got back to the house Miki said, well Ice, your face is very dirty. Why don't you go take a bath while I put these clothes away? I started to protest, but she said, please, give me a few minutes to process everything. I need to think and you need to are dirty and you smell like diesel fuel and motor oil. Okay mom. I said and headed up the stairs. After I undressed in the bathroom I washed myself carefully to clean off any diesel fuel or motor oil that was on my skin, and after placing the clothes in the hamper I climbed into the tub. I started to doze in the warm water when I heard the door open behind me. I turned to see Mickey getting undressed. She put her finger to her lips and whispered, SHH, I am going to take a bath with you, and you are going to tell me your story, and this time I want the whole truth. I watched her take off her clothes, and despite myself I started to get aroused. She did look like my mother, but as Ika had reminded me, she clearly wasn't. I watched her as she climbed into the tub and sat down opposite of me. She wasn't trying to hide her nakedness from me. Instead she spread out her legs to make sure that I had a good view. She also could see me getting aroused and said, you know what Ice, your story can wait. She stood up and reached for my hand. First you are going to make love to me, okay? End of the part 1. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay it's time for me to go. Bye bye.